The observation deck had become a tomb of ice. Marin Solis pressed her trembling hands against the frost-covered viewport, watching the distant stars blur through failing life support systems. The emergency beacon blinked uselessly in the corner. No one was coming. Not in time. The Covenant patrol had seen to that when they'd torn through the civilian transport's hull 3 cycles ago. She'd survived the initial attack by hiding in the cargo bay. Everyone else was gone, vented into space, or worse. And now the cold was claiming her too. Degree by degree, as the ship's power bled into the void, her breath came in shallow clouds. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. Maybe 2. Time had become elastic, unreliable. That's when she heard it, a scratching sound from the ventilation shaft. Marin turned her head slowly, conserving what little energy remained. A panel clattered open, and something small emerged into the dim emergency lighting. A cub. Not human. Definitely not human. The creature was covered in dense silver fur, with 4 arms and luminous amber eyes that seemed far too intelligent for something so young. It stood perhaps waist-high, its triangular ears swiveling toward her as it assessed the situation with alarming clarity. "Karu," it said, tapping its chest with one small paw. Its voice held a musical quality, though the word itself was clearly a name, not its species designation. Marin tried to speak, but her jaw had locked from the cold. She managed only a weak nod. Karu approached cautiously, those amber eyes widening as he drew closer. He reached out one tentative paw and touched her hand. The cub recoiled immediately, chittering in what could only be distress. Her skin must have felt like death itself. The young alien turned and bounded back toward the ventilation shaft, disappearing into darkness. She was alone again. Marin closed her eyes, accepting the inevitable. At least she'd seen something beautiful before the end, proof that the universe held more than just the Covenant's cruelty. But Karu returned. He dragged something behind him, struggling with the weight despite having 4 arms to manage it. As he emerged fully into the light, Marin recognized what he carried. Thick, woven bedding, intricately patterned with symbols that spoke of heritage and history. The fabric shimmered with bioluminescent threads that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was clearly precious, irreplaceable. Karu approached her again, spreading the bedding across the floor. He gestured urgently, trying to communicate with chirps and hand movements. When Marin couldn't respond, the cub did something extraordinary. He began to rip the bedding apart. His small claws tore through the ancient fabric with desperate efficiency, shredding the beautiful patterns into strips. Marin watched in confusion as he worked, wondering if hypothermia had finally taken her mind. But then Karu began wrapping the strips around her. Around her hands first, binding them in layers of the warm, bioluminescent material. Then, her feet, her torso. He worked with single-minded determination, using all 4 arms to manipulate the fabric, creating a cocoon of warmth around the dying human. The bedding held residual heat and something more. As the fabric touched her skin, Marin felt a gentle tingling sensation. The bioluminescent threads weren't just decorative. They generated thermal energy, a technology woven directly into the cloth itself. Warmth began to seep back into her extremities. Painful at first, like needles of fire, but gloriously alive. Karu stepped back to examine his work, then chittered in dissatisfaction. Not enough. She was still shaking, still fading. The cub disappeared into the ventilation shaft again. This time when he returned, he carried more bedding. Larger pieces, even more elaborately decorated. Marin's clearing mind recognized what she was seeing. These weren't just blankets. They were ceremonial wrappings, the kind used in important cultural rituals. Each piece told a story in its patterns, and Karu was destroying them all. For her. A stranger. A human. "No," Marin managed to whisper through cracked lips. "Your mother's." "That's your mother's." Karu paused, meeting her eyes. For a moment, understanding passed between species, between worlds. "Yes," his expression said. "And you need it more." He resumed his work, tearing and wrapping, building a nest of warmth around her until Marin felt truly impossibly warm for the first time in days. The bioluminescent threads pulsed around her like a second heartbeat, and she realized the cub had quite literally wrapped her in his heritage, his history, his mother's memory. Karu climbed into the nest beside her, pressing his small furred body against her side, adding his own body heat to the equation. He began to purr, or something like it, a deep thrumming that vibrated through her chest. "Why?" Marin asked, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Why would you do this for me?" Karu looked up at her, those amber eyes ancient despite his youth. He placed one small paw over her heart, then over his own. The message was clear. Because life is sacred. Because kindness transcends species. Because in a universe torn by war and hatred, someone had to choose differently. 3 hours later, when the rescue ship finally arrived, they found an impossible sight. A human woman, wrapped in the sacred bedding of the Velen people, protected by a cub who had sacrificed his most precious inheritance to save a stranger. The Velen elders would later declare Karu's actions the highest expression of their cultural values, that compassion and sacrifice defined true nobility, not possession or power. And Marin Solis would spend the rest of her life telling the story of the cub who taught the galaxy what humanity truly meant. Not human supremacy, not human exceptionalism, simply humanity, the kind that transcends DNA and reaches across the stars to say, "You are worth saving, you matter, you are not alone." In the cold darkness of space, where cruelty so often reigned, one small act of kindness had become a legend. And it all started with a cub who ripped apart his mother's bedding to keep a dying stranger warm.